The Greek aphorism "Know thyself" was inscribed at the Temple of Delphi. Yet self-knowledge proves philosophy's most elusive pursuit. Who are you, truly? Not who others say you are. Not who you think you should be. But who you perceive yourself to be, your self-image. This perception isn't passive reflection. It's active construction, determining the boundaries of what you believe possible. Your life, in every measurable dimension, corresponds to the size of your self-image. This isn't metaphysics. It's psychology, neuroscience, and phenomenology converging on one truth: we inhabit not reality itself, but our interpretation of it. And that interpretation begins with how we see ourselves. Jean-Paul Sartre declared, "Hell is other people." Not because others are inherently hostile, but because their gaze constructs us. His concept of the look describes how we become objects in others' perception, internalizing their judgment as self-definition. The child compared unfavorably to siblings. The student labeled difficult in classroom systems designed for conformity. The individual measured against media-constructed ideals. Psychologist Charles Cooley termed this the looking-glass self. We see ourselves reflected in others' responses, gradually accepting their perception as our own reality. Educational philosopher John Taylor Gatto argued that mass schooling functions primarily as socialization, not education, training compliance, not capability. Those who don't conform to narrow learning modalities internalize failure, though the system itself may be inadequate, not the individual. Einstein observed, "Everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid." The internalized judgments become autonomous, no longer requiring external reinforcement. You become your own prison guard. What philosopher Slavoj Žižek calls symbolic violence, violence so normalized it becomes invisible, pervades self-image construction. Constant comparison. Impossible standards. The equation of worth with achievement, appearance, or social approval. These aren't occasional pressures but atmospheric conditions, the water we swim in without recognizing we're wet. Media theorist Marshall McLuhan warned, "We become what we behold." In an age of curated digital lives, we behold filtered perfection, then judge our messy reality against it. The comparison itself reveals the error. You're comparing your complete inner experience, doubts, struggles, complexity with others' external presentation. It's comparing the making of the sausage with the menu description. Philosopher Martha Nussbaum distinguishes shame from guilt. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says I am something wrong. Normalized self-rejection operates at the level of shame, not about specific actions but about fundamental being. This becomes particularly insidious when spiritual or self-development communities impose new conformity standards. The authentic self becomes another role to perform, another way to fail. Buddhist philosophy distinguishes Buddha nature, the unconditioned awareness present from birth, from the skandhas, the accumulated layers of conditioning obscuring it. You weren't born with limiting self-image. Infants don't doubt their worth or compare themselves to other infants. Self-rejection is learned, not innate. Psychologist Carl Rogers proposed that every organism has an actualizing tendency and inherent drive toward growth and fulfillment of potential. Dysfunction occurs when conditions of worth are imposed. You're valuable if you achieve this, look like that, behave thus. The child internalizes conditions, fragments from wholeness, creates a false self, as psychoanalyst D.W. Winnicott termed it, to meet external demands while the true self goes underground. But essence doesn't disappear. It merely gets obscured. Like a sculpture within marble, it awaits liberation from what doesn't belong. The question isn't how do I become someone valuable? It's what conditioning obscures the value I already am. Philosopher Gilles Deleuze argued for difference as ontologically primary, not deviation from a standard, but fundamental reality. There is no template. Each being is original, not copy. Medieval philosopher Duns Scotus coined haexiety, the thisness that makes something irreducibly itself. Not its properties or categories, but its singular existence. You're not a flawed version of some ideal human. You're a unique instantiation of consciousness, never before expressed, never to be repeated. Existentialist philosophy, particularly in Kierkegaard and Heidegger, emphasizes the individual's task, becoming who you uniquely are rather than what the they prescribes. Heidegger's Das Man, the anonymous they, represents social conformity's pressure. They say you should live this way, want these things, be that person. Authenticity requires rejecting they and claiming your own existence. Your singularity is an egotism. It's ontology. You cannot escape being uniquely you. The only question is whether you'll do so consciously or remain alienated from your own being. In market economics, scarcity creates value. The unique, the rare, commands premium. Yet humans, infinite in variety, each genuinely unique, pursue standardization. Fashion trends make everyone look similar. Social media platforms homogenize expression. Educational systems reward conformity. The result, beings of inherent singularity attempting to erase their most valuable quality. Philosopher Charles Taylor calls this the malaise of modernity, loss of meaning through flattening of distinction, where everyone must fit prescribed molds. Nietzsche railed against herd morality, the collective's demand for sameness, mediocrity elevated as virtue. His overman isn't superior to others but authentic to self, willing to stand alone rather than dissolve into mass. The paradox, in becoming more alike, we lose what makes us valuable to ourselves and others. Every relationship you have is unrepeatable because you're unrepeatable. Every contribution you make bears your unique signature. Attempts at standardization aren't just aesthetically unfortunate. They're existentially tragic. This raises philosophy's perennial question: if you're already uniquely valuable, why improve? Isn't self-acceptance enough? Aristotle distinguished first actuality from second actuality. An acorn is actually an acorn, first actuality, but potentially an oak, second actuality. Its telos, inherent purpose, is becoming fully itself. You have an essence that remains constant, and potential that unfolds. You're not building something foreign to yourself but actualizing what's already latent. The Stoics emphasized oikeiosis, appropriate action aligned with one's nature. Improvement isn't becoming someone else but removing obstacles to expressing who you are. Jung's individuation describes this precisely, integrating unconscious aspects, not to create but to discover wholeness already present. The question shifts from how do I become valuable, to how do I remove what blocks my natural expression. You're not constructing a self. You're excavating one. Insecurity, for example, isn't your essence. It's conditioning layered atop essence. Removing it doesn't change you, it reveals you. Neuroscience reveals that perception isn't passive reception but active construction. Your brain generates reality from incomplete sensory data, filling gaps with expectation. Philosopher Immanuel Kant argued that we never experience things in themselves, noumena, but only phenomena reality is filtered through conceptual categories. We don't see the world as it is but as we are. Psychologist Albert Ellis developed rational emotive behavior therapy on this insight. Events don't cause emotions, interpretations of events do. The gap between occurrence and meaning is where freedom lives. Self-image operates identically. You don't perceive yourself objectively. you interpret yourself through accumulated beliefs, creating self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe you're incapable, you won't attempt challenges that might disprove it. If you believe you're unworthy, you'll accept treatment confirming it. The belief shapes behavior, behavior creates evidence, evidence reinforces belief. This isn't determinism. It's recognizing that changing perception changes experienced reality. Sociologist Irving Goffman described social interaction as dramaturgy, where actors managing impressions, wearing masks. Persona literally means mask, for different audiences. Others respond to the persona we project, and we interpret their responses as reflections of our true self. But they're responding to our presentation, not our essence. If you present yourself as unworthy through apologetic body language, self-deprecating speech, reluctant engagement, others treat you accordingly. You then cite their treatment as evidence of unworthiness. The cycle persists until you recognize its circularity. Others see what you show. You show what you believe. Therefore, changing belief changes what others see. This isn't manipulation. It's recognizing that social perception is collaborative construction, not objective assessment. Philosopher Martin Buber distinguished I-it relations, treating others as objects, from I-thou, genuine meeting. But before I-thou with others, there must be I-thou with self, treating yourself as subject, not object of judgment. The concept of deservingness contains philosophical tension. Desert implies hierarchy, comparison, earning. Yet being itself requires no justification. Existentialism affirms, existence precedes essence. You exist first, without reason or justification. You don't earn the right to be, you simply are. Yet practically, self-image around deservingness determines what you'll accept, pursue, or tolerate. Low sense of worth creates tolerance for mistreatment, one-sided relationships, unfulfilling circumstances. This operates through what psychologists call self-schema, cognitive frameworks filtering experience for schema-consistent information. If your schema says I'm unworthy, you notice evidence confirming it while dismissing contrary evidence. But there's also energetic resonance, what you emanate attracts corresponding response. Present as victim, you attract exploiters. Present as sovereign, you attract respect. Again, not magical thinking but recognizing that energy, posture, communication style, and boundaries all signal how you view yourself, inviting corresponding treatment. Guilt serves evolutionary purpose, social cohesion through behavioral correction. Feel bad about harm caused, make amends, adjust behavior. But guilt persisting beyond its function becomes pathology. Philosopher Paul Ricoeur distinguished fault, specific wrong action, from sin, ontological stain. Healthy guilt addresses fault. Toxic guilt assumes sin, you're fundamentally corrupted. Hannah Arendt, examining Nazi bureaucrats, identified the banality of evil, ordinary people committing atrocities through conformity. But she also wrote of forgiveness as necessity. Without being forgiven, we would remain the victims of the consequences of our actions. Self-forgiveness isn't excusing harm but refusing to make past actions into permanent identity. You're not what you did. Your consciousness capable of different choices. The Stoic practice of negative visualization included imagining one's death to recognize the finite time available for rumination. How many more years will you punish yourself for what cannot be changed? Buddhist skillful action asks, is this thought or behavior helping or hindering? Prolonged self-punishment helps nothing, hinders everything. Comparison assumes commensurability, that different entities can be measured on same scale. But philosopher Alfred North Whitehead argued that actual entities are irreducibly unique, not quantifiable on common metrics. Comparing your life to another's commits category error. You're comparing incomparables, different starting points, different challenges, different purposes, different paths. Social psychologist Leon Festinger coined social comparison theory. We evaluate ourselves by comparison to others. But he noted that comparison causes distress when targets are unrealistic or information is incomplete. You see others' highlight reels while experiencing your behind the scenes. The asymmetry makes valid comparison impossible. Moreover, Heraclitus taught Pantarei, everything flows. The life you compare against is itself in flux, probably nothing like its surface appearance. Comparison also assumes linear progress toward common destination. But if purposes differ, comparing progress makes no sense. A fish and a bird moving toward different habitats cannot meaningfully compare swimming versus flying abilities. Your path is yours alone. Others' paths can inspire but never serve as standard for measurement. Heidegger described human existence as thrown into situations not chosen: family, culture, historical moment. You don't select your starting conditions. But thrownness doesn't determine what you make of those conditions. Sartre insisted, man is condemned to be free even under constraint, freedom of response remains. Your past happened. It shaped you. But does it define you? Only if you allow it. Viktor Frankl, surviving Nazi concentration camps, concluded, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. This isn't denying trauma's impact. It's refusing to make trauma into identity. Events happen to you, they need not become you. Jung argued that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. By refusing to face and integrate difficult past experiences, we perpetuate their control. Acceptance allows transcendence. Nietzsche's amor fati, love of fate, doesn't mean approving what happened but accepting it as necessary to who you've become. Every experience, even painful ones, contributed to your current being. The question shifts from why did this happen to me, to what am I becoming through this? Psychologist Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory demonstrates that confidence comes not from positive thinking but from mastery experiences, actually succeeding at challenges. You can't think your way to self-esteem. You must act, experience capability, integrate evidence of competence. This creates dilemma. You need confidence to attempt challenges, but attempting challenges builds confidence. The solution: willingness to begin before feeling ready. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard called this the leap of faith, not religious belief but existential commitment despite uncertainty. You expose yourself to situations where competence hasn't yet developed. Through engagement, stumbling, learning, improving capability emerges, and with it, authentic self-confidence. This differs from affirmations, which attempt to install belief without evidence. Genuine self-image strengthens through demonstrated capacity, not repeated assertions. Small wins accumulate. Each successful navigation of formerly difficult terrain expands your sense of what's possible. Cognitive psychology confirms that articulating goals increases achievement likelihood. Writing crystallizes vague intention into concrete vision. But this isn't vision board manifestation. It's clarifying what philosopher Charles Taylor calls strong evaluation, determining what matters most, defining identity through commitment. Write not what you want to have but who you want to be. Not external acquisitions but internal qualities. How does this person feel? How do they respond to challenge? How do they treat themselves and others? This description isn't fictional future self but recognition of latent potential. Remember, you're not building foreign identity but articulating what's already embryonically present. Phenomenologist Edmund Husserl distinguished empty from fulfilled intention. Empty intention points towards something not yet real. But if the qualities you name are genuinely yours to develop, the intention isn't empty but unfulfilled, awaiting actualization. The written vision serves as touchstone, reminder during moments of forgetting. It's not creating something new but remembering what you're becoming. Perhaps self-image's deepest function is permission, what you'll allow yourself to experience, pursue, become. If self-image is person who fails, you'll sabotage success. If person unworthy of love, you'll reject genuine connection. If person stuck in past, you'll block future possibility. Expanded self-image is an arrogance. It's removing arbitrary constraints on experience. The question isn't am I good enough for this life I envision, but why wouldn't I be? On what basis does consciousness judge itself unworthy of what consciousness itself can conceive? You exist. Consciousness operates through you. The capacity to envision implies capacity to pursue. The vision itself is evidence of possibility. Philosopher Alan Watts noted that the universe doesn't make mistakes, everything arising is exactly what's needed. Your arising was an error. Your desires aren't illegitimate. Your potential isn't presumption. Self-image as permission means recognizing there is no external authority determining your worthiness. You are the authority. And the only question is whether you'll authorize your own flourishing. We've traced self-image from its social construction through philosophical foundations of uniqueness, the mechanics of perception, deconstruction of false limitations, and building authentic vision. The pattern reveals, you're born unique, conditioned toward conformity, capable of remembering and reclaiming originality. Self-image isn't discovered in isolation but cultivated through engagement, attempting, failing, learning, integrating. It's not positive thinking but embodied evidence of capability. Most crucially, your self-image doesn't reflect your worth. Your worth is inherent, unconditional. Self-image determines only what you'll permit yourself to experience of that worth. Existentialist Simone de Beauvoir wrote, "One is not born, but rather becomes. A woman identity isn't given but constructed." She meant this as recognition of freedom. You're not predetermined but self-creating. The same applies universally, you're not born but become who you are. And becoming never finishes. Each moment offers new choice about who to be. The call isn't to achieve perfect self-image but to recognize its constructedness. It's not objective truth but working hypothesis, always revisable. What would shift if you question limiting self-definitions with same skepticism you apply to external authorities? If you demanded evidence for claims of unworthiness as rigorously as for claims of capability? Your life is indeed the size of your self-image. Not because reality conforms to belief, but because self-image determines what you'll attempt, accept, pursue, and become. The universe doesn't make superfluous beings. Your existence itself is evidence of necessity. Your unique configuration of consciousness has never occurred before and never will again. That's not burden to live up to. It's recognition that you already are what you're seeking permission to become. Expand the image. Remove false constraints. Authorize your own flourishing. The authentic self isn't waiting to be discovered in some future moment. It's present now, beneath layers of conditioning, awaiting your recognition and claim. You are not the prison. You are the key.